In the Old Testament, there is a God who commands storms, moves the seas, and reigns over a heavenly court. He is a warrior God who rides a winged chariot. Can anyone guess who this God is? That's right, it's Baal. Welcome to part 3 of a series on the gods of ancient Israel, based on Mark Smith's The Early History of God. Last episode, we explored El, the head of the Canaanite pantheon of gods. El is unique among these deities in his special treatment that he receives from Israel. Not once in the Old Testament is El criticized, rather, he and all of his qualities are absorbed into Yahweh. In fact, Israel's name is Israel, and the book of Exodus highlights how God revealed himself to humanity as El before he revealed himself as Yahweh. And the book of Exodus highlights how God revealed himself to humanity as El before he revealed his true name Yahweh to Moses. Once the Israelites recognized Yahweh as the most powerful deity, they simply took El's name and used it as a generic title for God, such as when they referred to Yahweh as El Elyon, meaning God Most High. As we'll find out though, none of the other Canaanite deities received this cushy treatment. Though, like El, their qualities were eventually absorbed by Yahweh too. Up until the 20th century, it was generally assumed that Yahweh and Baal were always at odds in the Old Testament. This is simply not true. One of the ways we know this is because the names of King Saul's family members were derived from Baal, such as Eshbaal and Meribbaal. Names in the ancient world were quite important, so this reveals how even during the reigns of Israel's monarchy, it was acceptable to name your children after the god Baal. Speaking of names, we know that the judge Gideon, who lived before the monarchy, also went by the name Jerubbaal. Jerubbaal means may Baal contend, as in contend with Yahweh. Here we see how there was a bit of a rivalry between Yahweh and Baal. However, in passages written a little bit later, Gideon's name was changed to Jerubashet, which means shame on Baal. And those names I mentioned earlier, Eshbaal and Meribbaal, were changed to Ishbosheth, meaning man of shame, and Mephibosheth, or mouth of shame. Thus we can see a progression here. Early on, Baal was a mere contender with Yahweh, but as time progressed, the Israelites viewed Baal with disgust. When and how did this shift in Baal's status happen? There is archaeological evidence from the 9th century BC in Samaria that Baal was worshipped there. This matches up with the Old Testament's timeline in which King Ahab and Queen Jezebel from that same time period not only encouraged Baal worship but persecuted Yahweh's prophets. As time moved on, so did Baal worship. The mid-9th century king Jehu launched a crusade against Baal worship, though he didn't quite eradicate the practice. Also, remember how I mentioned that the god El's name eventually became a generic name for Israel's god? Well, Baal soon became a generic name for false gods. We know this because the 8th century prophet Hosea uses the terms the Baal and the Baals to refer to false gods. Hosea mentions something else of note. He prophesies that Yahweh will produce a cosmic bounty for Israel, and that his message will traverse the heavens and the earth, producing universal fertility. This language is pretty much ripped straight from a similar passage about Baal and his fellow Canaanite god Anat. What is going on here? Well, let's take a look at exactly who Baal is. Baal is a storm god. He hovers over the waters and processes with an entourage of lesser deities. He was known as the Cloud Rider, and he also rode a winged chariot. Yahweh is also a storm god who dwells above the waters. He too has a heavenly court and was known as the rider over the steeps. In Psalm 96, he rides a divine chariot. Oh, and I should mention that both Baal and Yahweh were both depicted as bulls sometimes. Yahweh defeats his cosmic enemy, the Leviathan, and Baal bests the divine beast Yam. Yahweh's temple is on the mountain Zion, from which he brings rain. Baal's temple is also on a mountain, and he too brings rain from it. So did the Israelites just copy Baal? Is Yahweh just an Israelite version of his Canaanite counterpart? Not exactly. Last week we covered how Yahweh absorbed all of El's qualities. By the time of the monarchy, El was not the fatherly, mountain-dwelling, dream-appearing god. Yahweh was. The same can be said of Baal. Maybe during the Judges period, Baal commanded the seas, but during the monarchy, the prophets retorted, nope, Yahweh is the god of the sea. Consider this, if I'm in a kingdom and I really like my king, and someone else comes up to me and says, my king is king of the mountains, I'd reply, nuh-uh, my king is king of the mountains. If they said, my king is stronger than an ox, he is the king of the oxes, or oxen, I would say, nope, my king is stronger than an ox and king of the oxes, or oxen. I think you can see where this is going. Basically, if Baal is a false god, it doesn't mean there's no such thing as a storm god anymore. I mean, someone has to command the weather. Instead, Yahweh is the god of everyone and everything, including the storms, so he gets all the fancy titles and descriptions that used to belong to Baal. So Baal and Yahweh coexisted for a bit. In fact, some kings like Ahab preferred Baal. Gradually, the prophets came to detest Baal and they worked to ban worship of him. Rather than erase his qualities, though, they attributed them to Yahweh instead. Of all the adversarial deities in the Old Testament, Baal might seem perhaps the most well-known, but there are a couple of other gods, I should say, that deserve some attention, and we will cover them next week. Until then, have a great day. God bless you.